Okay, well, welcome everybody. There are a few more seats. If you don't have a seat, maybe just squeeze in or move into the insides because there's a few more seats here and we definitely have a full house. But I want to start by saying good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Scovan Engineering, I want to welcome you to this year's edition of International Women's Day. My name is Donovan Nielsen and I'm the president of Scovan Engineering. And what a great way to spend a Monday, right? Like Mondays typically are the first day after the weekend, getting back in the routine, getting going, but this is a much more fun way to spend a Monday. And let's try to stay positive. Sounds like there's some things happening today that I haven't paid attention to, but in general, let's enjoy today and see this as a positive thing. So this is an event we're very proud of. People ask us why we do it, and there's many different reasons. And when we sent out the invitation, I think at first we were overwhelmed by the response of the sponsorship, and even more so by the response of people that wanted to attend this event. So we had over 220 people respond in a matter of 2 days, which is great. And then we panicked a little bit and said we should cut off registration, and then hoped that not everybody showed up. But we're really glad you're here today. And I apologize for anyone that's in the back that has to stand, but we've only got about a 3-hour program, so you should be okay. And this is especially a proud event for me because last year my very own daughter participated in this event. She's 9 years old. She stood up here last year and talked about, even as a child, how she sets goals and how she works hard to overcome them and how she's trying to accomplish things. And at least for me as a dad, it was a very special moment, but it's something that she remembers even now. It was easy to convince her yesterday. She came with me to help set up some things, but she now remembers this event as something that was empowering to her and hopefully something that she takes with her for her the rest of her childhood and her career as she gets going. So I mentioned the overwhelming response by sponsors, and I just want to quickly acknowledge some of the sponsors that volunteered to help out with today. So our gold sponsors today are MasTec, PTW, and Colliers. Our silver sponsors are AFTI WatchDog, Drifter, Enerflex, Mergen Law, and Spartan Controls. And then our bronze sponsors were AES, Deltastream, HIVE Gemini, Maxfield, Osum, and Starbelly. So maybe we can just start with a quick round of applause for everyone that helped make today happen. So an equal world is an enabled world. Today we want to celebrate women's achievements, we want to raise awareness against biases, and we want to take action for equality. So Scovan hosts this event because a while ago we made a decision that as part of our culture we want to be active in the community, we want to make a difference. That's part of why we do a lot of things, from volunteering our time at the food bank, the different shelters, or giving blood, or even why we sponsor amateur athletes like Alysia, who you'll hear more from today. But even more so, it's because we understand the impact that having a diverse team can have. And today is a great example of having a diverse team working with you. I'm going to try to take as much credit for today as possible, but in reality, I did nothing, and there's a great team that helped plan all this, that did all the hard work, that did all the setup, the PowerPoints and everything you say today. But even more so, I want to acknowledge one person whose vision this event really is, and that's Valerie Stewart, who you'll hear from today, and many of you know. But Valerie's an important part of our management team, and we're lucky to have her here at Scovan. So an equal world needs to go beyond just the numbers, and it's about having an inclusive culture. Hiring goals may push diversity, but it won't bring about inclusive culture on its own. So the experience has to go beyond just the hiring process. And we need to look at the end-to-end employee experience. We need to promote inclusion and nurture employee diversity and look for ways to measure the impact wherever possible. So that's even looking at things like who are we inviting to meetings, who are we asking to speak in front of our team, and how are we making sure that everything we do includes diversity and an inclusive culture. So putting emphasis on employee experience changes everything, and it needs to happen right from the start with recruiting, the hiring, your onboarding, the daily aspects of work, the culture, and even succession planning and mentoring. So some of my own observations at Scovan are the women of our organization really help drive the culture. And at Scovan, we've made culture something that we focus on a lot and is forefront of a lot of things we do and something we hold dear. But when I look at some of the examples of that, when we ask for volunteers, the women of our organization tend to be overrepresented. When we're doing team building events or community events or other social events, the women of our team always step up and they drive the culture of our organization. So for a company that makes culture a priority, these are all important things. So 10 years ago, Scovan was started by 2 white dudes. I left out old because that's the other thing that happens in this industry, it tends to be old white dudes. We're getting older, but when we started, we weren't old. But the success of Scovan has come because of the hard work of our diversified team over that 10 years. And I just want to make one example. So the very first employee we ever hired was Lindsay Chambers. Sorry, she changed her name and I almost reverted to 10 years ago when it was a different name, but I think I got that right. So if you haven't met Lindsay before, she's a quiet spirit, but yet a very strong person, especially after a glass of wine. And she has been at the core of who Scovan has been for the entire 10 years we've been here. So she is part of our project controls team and has made a big difference on projects, but even more importantly, recently she assumed the role of leading one of our most important corporate initiatives, which we call Fresh Fridays. And that's a time where we spend time together being intentional about how do we actually make a difference, how do we add value to our clients, and how do we invest time, resources, and even money to getting better and solving some of the problems in our industry. So she's responsible for planning, leading, and inspiring one of these most important platforms we have at Scovan and be intentional about helping us get better. So I'm really looking forward to today's event. Hopefully all of you are as well. So sit back and enjoy the rest of the program, and thanks again for joining us.
This is our photo. There you go. Equal for each. Thank you, ladies. This is how spontaneous they are. They just like strategized that before they came on. Thank you. Well, thank you, Donovan, for that really great introduction. And welcome all of you. I'm just so pleased to see a full house full of wonderful faces and friends and supporters in this room. It really means a lot to us for all of you to be here. And welcome to those who are watching on our live stream feed. We are shooting this and airing it live today, and will be available for recording. Again, Donovan also thanked our team, but I really want to thank our team. It really takes a whole kind of village to organize an event like this, and our team always steps up and does such a great job of putting things together so effortlessly and flawlessly. So thanks again to all of you. You know who you are, but appreciate so much of all your effort. And of course, I have to thank Donovan and Scott for letting me run with this crazy idea for a second year in a row. So I think we might have something here. Hopefully we'll continue to carry on this event. So International Women's Day, sorry, my name is Valerie Stewart. I'm Director of Business Development at Scovan Engineering. So International Women's Day celebrates the economic, cultural, and political achievements of women across the globe. There are many ways to celebrate International Women's Day. So I've got a couple of examples for you. Like here in Canada, Sportsnet, I don't know if anybody caught this last night, but had an entire female broadcast crew. It was really awesome. We had they had Chris Simpson, Cassie Campbell, and Leah Hexall, along with as well in the background was all the programmers were women, and they rocked it. They really did a fantastic job, and it was so inspiring to see that. As well, Air Canada charters an all-female flight crew in celebration of International Women's Day, and that again is also including the grounds and the controllers, and everyone on the team is 100% female and supporting women in aviation. And for us, and this is how we're celebrating this day with you. This is our gift to you, to bring together an incredible group of women that we have seated here today, as well as these individuals in the room, to recognize the value that women bring to the energy industry and professional sport. So we do have an incredible group of leaders here today to share their knowledge, experiences, and strategies on how they contributed to, or how they've contributed to accelerating positive change in their own pursuit of excellence. So to our speakers, Terri Steeves, Karla Ingoldsby, and Alysia Rissling, thank you for saying yes and agreeing to be here today, and to share your personal stories. I was starting to sound like Brené Brown when I was giving them notes. I'm like, be vulnerable. Be your, they're probably like, oh my God. A little bit. I know. But they stepped up and they continued on with that email instructions, and they've just, by being here, you're really demonstrating your commitment to the cause to step up and to provide your stories and share your stories with us. So as you've already noticed, we actually are missing one of our keynote speakers. Unfortunately, Marcia Wolf-Collar could not be here today due to a family emergency, and she sends her sincerest regards. As much as this event is about featuring these fantastic leaders, this event is also about you. So each of you is here today because you already lean in. You lean into gender equality, advocacy, and making a difference. Each of you is making a mark in your own way, and you each have your own unique stories to tell. Either through mentorship, rising people up, leading by example, challenging social norms, or overcoming your own personal challenges. This is your forum. And we're going to cover a range of really interesting topics today, but I have 3 things that I want you to think about. Who do you celebrate International Women's Day for? Is it your mother? Is it your daughter? Your sisters? The women who fought for our rights before us? Or is it the next generation of leaders that's going to shape our world? For me, it's a combination of people. It's for my mother and my grandmother, who came from a long line of strong, very confident women and hardworking women who set high standards and inspired me every day. And for my father, who told me I could be anything I wanted and always treated me as an equal to my brother. And now, as a mother myself, I celebrate International Women's Day for these 3 kiddos, my 2 sons and a daughter. And I always think about how can I raise my 6-year-old daughter to have the courage to be fearless and achieve her dreams, even if it is to be a mermaid right now. And to raise my boys to believe that women are strong, capable, and equal, and can be leaders in their own right among men. The second thing I want you to think about is, how are you being a change agent for equality, advocating for women, creating opportunity, carving a path for the next generation? Are you lifting other people up? Are you being a mentor? Having the courage to voice your opinions? Are you stepping up, reaching outside your comfort zone? Because it gets a little uncomfortable sometimes. And being a leader where you can, either at work or at your community or in your home. And I don't mean like, how are you changing the world, because that's kind of daunting. But what small things are you doing in your sphere that can influence change in some way? So I'll give you an example. I had the opportunity to chair the Canadian Heavy Oil Association Fall Conference this year, and it's a great organization that hosts many informative events and social events throughout the year, and a big part of the role is to determine the speakers for the conference. So as chair, I challenge my committee to think about diversity when selecting their speakers. That meant diversity in age, race, and of course, gender. And as a result, we hosted a fantastic conference with 50% of our speakers being female for what I think was the first time ever. I didn't have a chance to fact check that. But we also covered a range of topics and brought a unique perspective that was not a part of the traditional program by bringing in that diversity. And we had just an incredible amount of feedback, positive feedback from everybody saying what a unique and diverse conference it really was. So the third thing I want you to think about is, are you aware of your unconscious bias? So this goes for everyone. We all have ideas ingrained in our mind of traditional male and female roles. It starts when we're little and we kind of grow up within it, ingrained in our society. But that's why these kind of jokes, which you've probably heard this before, are so impactful. So it says, a father and a son get in a car crash and rush to the hospital. The father dies. The boy is taken into the operating room and the surgeon says, I can't operate on this boy because he's my son. Well, how is that possible? For some reason, there's approximately 50 to 70% of the population is unable to solve this riddle because they just can't imagine a woman as a surgeon. And it just goes beyond just this joke, but how does that impact your choices when you're applying for a job in a trade, or you're hiring a drilling manager, you're seeking a candidate to run a fabrication shop? Are we limiting ourselves and the potential of our organizations by subconsciously ruling out half the population before we've even begun? So you thought you were here just to listen to speakers, but I've already given you some homework. So let's get started. We're pleased to align this year with the nonprofit organization Canada Bridges this year. It's a wonderful organization that is focused on unveiling human potential in youth ages 16 to 30, providing support and capacity building for those who may not have the same access to resources and opportunities others might have. So please welcome Alysia Lindsay, Executive Director, Canada Bridges.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here today on behalf of Bridges Social Development, or Canada Bridges. Our organization works towards a world where all youth, regardless of gender, background, community, can show up, stand up, and be heard. Now take a minute and think about that. What if those youth were here today? What would they have to say? What would they change? How could that help all of our communities? We know that many youth, for a wide range of reasons, don't always have access to the connections or resources that they need to live out their visions for change. At the same time, these youth also have the wisest perspectives, the deepest insights, and greatest potential. By focusing on supporting youth-led change and amplifying youth voice, we hope to create a stronger, more diverse, and healthier society for us all. According to Brittany, a young leader that we get to work with, there's adults there, not telling us how to do things or what to do, but encouraging us to open up and speak up, encouraging our input. Canada Bridges has worked with youth like Brittany, thousands of them, from across Alberta between the ages of 16 and 30 for the past 10 years. And for the past 5 years, we've prioritized invitations to work with youth from the Siksika and Iahé Nakota nations, as well as here in Calgary, Indigenous youth. These youth face many barriers, including the effects of intergenerational trauma, lower levels of resources, and systemic racism. Despite this, they have tackled issues ranging from water rights to mental health, Indigenous language preservation to clean energy. With Canada Bridges' support, they have started youth programs, hosted community events, made award-winning films, represented their nations at international conferences, and started social businesses. Danny, who's here with me today, thanks Danny, is an award-winning artist with a passion for change around the issues of missing and murdered Indigenous women. We walk alongside these young leaders, connecting them to resources, learning, and coaching that help them create the change they want to see. As Tricia, another young leader, puts it, if I hadn't known about Canada Bridges, I wouldn't be as ambitious or courageous as I am today. They encourage, motivate, and are with us throughout the way. Today, we want to thank Scovan Engineering for inviting us to be here and for making a donation in honor of our keynote speakers. We will use these funds towards a new invitation that we have. We are starting a network of young change leaders, Indigenous change leaders from throughout Treaty 7. We know that this network will support many young leaders like Danny, Tricia, and Brittany, who I've mentioned here today, and take their visions for change forward in all of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. That's so great. So just to reiterate that, as a thank you, we are providing a donation to Canada Bridges on behalf of the speakers today. Yes. So Karla, I'd like to next introduce our first keynote speaker, Karla Ingoldsby, who's the VP of Thermal for Athabasca Oil Sands, and she's being presented by our gold sponsor, PTW Energy Services. PTW Energy Services is a privately company headquartered in Calgary, Alberta, and they offer industry-leading solutions including fabrication, construction, and maintenance services through a network that extends across Canada, the United States, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. They have over 3,500 talented people around, proud of the safe and reliable work they perform for their customers every day. So thank you, PTW, for your generous donation and support today. Karla Ingoldsby is the VP of Thermal Oil at Athabasca Oil Corp. She's responsible for stewarding the long-term strategy for the thermal oil division and is accountable for the development and operations of the oil sands assets. She brings nearly 20 years in the oil and gas industry, experience in the oil and gas industry. She started her career with Shell and in 2010 joined Athabasca, where she has been progressively appointed into more senior roles, including development manager in the joint venture with PetroChina Canada and director positions for geoscience, reservoir and development, ventures in land, and thermal oil production. Karla holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Alberta and is a member of APEGA and the Canadian Heavy Oil Association. And she's also the mother of 3 and is passionate about promoting the world's class responsible development of Canadian energy. Please welcome Karla.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for coming here today for this celebration. Recently, I was reminded about the amazing women that came before us who advocated for women's rights. Without their brave efforts, we wouldn't be here today. I'm truly excited to be part of the movement that celebrates the accomplishments of women and supports the acceleration of gender parity, especially in this energy industry that a number of us work. Now, I have to admit that when Valerie asked me to come and speak today, I almost said no, especially when she said that the focus for my talk should be about my experience and maybe some advice that I would have for men and women on how to advocate for gender equality. I was having a lot of internal dialogue at the time saying, will people find this interesting enough? Can I fit it in amongst my job or with my family commitments? And then I had to stop myself and think, what a truly female response that was. I was having this self-doubt that was creeping in on me that almost stopped me from this great opportunity. And I know for a fact that a number of my male counterparts wouldn't think twice about taking this opportunity to talk about their favorite topic themselves. So I realized that with the self-doubt, that's part of the problem we need to fix to get women out there in industry and being leaders. And I thought, why wouldn't you do it? If only one person can relate to one part of my story, won't that be worth it? So that's why I'm here today. It's interesting when I was asked to reflect upon my journey. As I thought about my life, I noticed that there were a few common themes that were woven throughout, and they helped me define the person that I've become. So I thought that's where my focus for my talk is going to be. And as an engineer, what better way to show my life than showing a project timeline? So for me, where it all began. I was born and raised in Lloydminster. I was one of 3 daughters to a dad who was an oilfield trucker and a farmer, and a mum who taught math at the college. My parents didn't have any sons, and for me that was such a blessing to have. They didn't see activities with a gender lens or a bias. They enrolled us in anything and everything. And here's some pictures of my childhood. Fishing, water skiing, riding dirt bikes around. I was fortunate to have the role models I did. In elementary school, my dad decided to stay home with us and my mom continued working at the college. This was a really unique thing to do in that day and age. And as it turns out, my dad was way ahead of his time. As a result, both my parents took part in the household duties. They cooked, they cleaned, they chauffeured us around. I think because I grew up with this family dynamic, I didn't really think of things as female work or male work. It was just work that needed to get done as a household. Having a father that played a big role in the household helped me to buck the gender bias. And I think a recent study actually supports this. There was a group of psychologists at UBC that did a study, and they found that daughters are more likely to aspire to gender-neutral careers like lawyers or doctors if their dad took part in the household duties that were typically designated as female duties. So all of you ladies in here, just take that tidbit home to your significant other. Maybe I'll get some help with some of the cleaning and the cooking tonight. But seriously, for me, my first lesson at a very young age was to buck the bias. For jobs, for activities, for interests, for me growing up, the traditional stereotype just didn't exist. Now, any parent knows that if you're going to be raising kids in a small town, to keep them out of trouble, you've got to enroll them in sports. And I played anything and everything, but my true love was soccer. Now, I had one hurdle in this small town, which was that I was the only female playing on the soccer team in Lloydminster for my age. And I wanted to play on the team that was our representative for all of Lloydminster at provincials, which happened to be a boys' team. My parents were great advocates for me, and they said, you know what, why don't you try out for the team, see if you make it. And here's a picture of me with my provincial team. You can see there's one scrawny little girl amongst all of those boys. And because of how my parents had raised me, I didn't think twice about playing on that team. I played on the team from about grade 7 all the way till I entered university. I was a great soccer player, but I also worked really hard on it. And as you can imagine, in the latter years, physically, I just was not as big as a lot of the other players on the field. So I focused on improving my own skills and playing to my strengths. Recently, I was thinking about how when I played on this team, I actually got very little resistance or backlash for it. The other players, the coaches, the parents, they were all really positive and wanted me to be there. And my mom actually was really good at helping me understand that. And she said, Karla, the reason there wasn't a lot of backlash to you playing on the team was you were one of the best players on it. They needed you to win. And with that, I learned a second lesson. For success, and I would say this is for males or females, is be great at what you do and work as hard or harder than everybody on the field. In my career, I've often found that I'm not the smartest person in the room. There's people there with advanced degrees or more experience than me. But I know if I work hard and I'm great at what I do, then I will have a chance and an opportunity. So after high school, I went to the University of Alberta in mechanical engineering. This was a natural progression for me because I loved math and science, and I had a mom that was a math instructor. At that time, when I went to the U of A, there was only about 10% females attending. And I would say, like a lot of people in the first years of university, you really struggle until you find a good group of people that you can work with and that you can study with. And I was no different. And because of the male to female ratio that we had, a lot of my friends ended up being guys. I think I was comfortable in this male-dominated field, challenging the gender norm because of my upbringing by my parents and also playing on that soccer team. After school, I went to work at Shell. It was an amazing company to work at, and I started my career as a reservoir engineer. I worked on deep sour gas wells in the foothills. Then I worked on a team that evaluated light oil plays in the US, offshore wells off Nova Scotia, and then I ended up in the oil sands. While I was at Shell, I found one of my other passions, which was traveling. I traveled around the globe, and I always found that it added a lot of perspective for me. And one of the trips that I remember the most is actually that middle one here, when I went for a trek through Uganda to find the mountain gorillas. So to set the stage a little bit here, after 2 long days of travel, my husband and I arrived at the hotel. We were exhausted, and we were greeted at the door by a guard with a very huge gun, and he escorted us inside to our room. It was at that time they told us, don't be alarmed, but you're not going to have electricity from about 11 p.m. at night till about 6 or 7 a.m. because of a rolling blackout. The hotel worker then told us, probably best that you guys stay inside tonight because it may not be the safest place to be wandering the streets when we don't have the electricity. And that was when the reality really hit home for me was that there was an inadequate supply of energy. And that's how they were dealing with it, was with the rolling blackouts. And I remember specifically thinking, what about the hospitals? What if you needed a life-saving surgery at that time? How do you manage around that? And I can still remember the specific moment, sitting awake in the middle of the night, hearing the chaos outside, all shrouded in darkness, and thinking to myself, this is why I'm in the energy industry. We are in this industry to actually pull millions of people out of poverty. We're here to provide cheap, reliable energy. This is my passion. This is my purpose. And to this day, it continues to be one of the reasons that I like working in the energy industry, that I'm passionate about it. And then that's, some of the advice I'd have is find your passion. I think to be truly successful, you need to be passionate about your job, and you have to be fulfilled in what you're doing. I've known far too many engineers throughout their careers that have stayed in engineering only for the money. If you aren't passionate about your job, why are you doing it? You don't want to look back 20 or 30 years in your career and be ambivalent about it. You should love it and be excited every day. After working at Shell, I joined Athabasca Oil Corporation. I was excited to work for a company that was focused on developing resources in Alberta. I joined Athabasca as a reservoir engineer and worked on the oil sands assets there. Since then, I've moved into progressively larger roles, and I've had the opportunity to work on many exciting projects that have resulted in billions of dollars of transactions. I'm currently the VP for Thermal Oil Division, where I manage about 100 staff that work in operations, engineering, geosciences, and regulatory. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about all the people that helped me along the way. No one can build a career on their own, and there are always people there supporting you along your way. And for me, there's 6 people that really stand out for me, although I know there's been many more that have helped me along the way. My first 2 mentors were female reservoir engineers, and I selected them specifically because they were female reservoir engineers. For me, they were real life examples of successful engineers. They taught me and they empowered a lot of the other younger engineers about women being able to hold their own in a boardroom and in conversations. So Margaret and Lorraine, those were my first 2 mentors I had. The other reason that I selected them was because they were actually, they were engineers and they were having young children at the time. And what they showed to me was that you can balance a successful career as well as have a family. You just have to find the right fit. And both of them chose to work part-time, and they were able to manage it, and it worked for the family and it worked for the company. My next 3 mentors were males, Bruce, Don, and Rob. And they all taught me who I want to be as a leader. All 3 of them were huge supporters of me throughout my career. They were mentors that saw potential in me that I didn't see. They helped me overcome any self-confidence issues I had or self-doubt. They were there advocating for me to change my roles, look at opportunities, and challenge myself. And I would say one of them actually held off his retirement for 6 months so I could have my 3rd child before I came back and took over his role. Lastly, I have my husband in here that I would also like to thank. He supported me along the way. He's taken 2 paternity leaves so that I could come back to work early. He's allowed my career to take priority in our family, and he said no to some great opportunities in his. And he does at least 50%, no, 70% of the household work. Let's be honest here. He's been a great partner for me. He's supportive of my career, and he's never asked me to shrink myself or opt out of opportunities, and I think that's important. So I recommend to everybody to make sure to reach out to those you respect, men and women, and people you want to learn from. Start building your network of mentors. No one can do this on their own. And the last thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is where I am today. So that's a picture of me. I have 3 young kids, 2, 4, and 6. Our life is chaos, but it's a good kind of chaos. I'll take it. The last thing that I'd like to say is that I really think that as a female leader, it's a myth to say you can have it all. My experience is that at any given day, you choose what part of your life you want to focus on, whether it's your career, your family, or yourself. Having it all, for me, has been an illusion. At the end of the day, everyone struggles with it and nobody has it figured out yet. I find for myself, at best, I can maybe get 2 out of 3 under control, and that's okay, because the other thing I've learned is that there is a season for everything. Right now, my season is having an executive role with 3 young children. This means I don't have much time for myself. I don't get to play soccer like I used to. My exotic travels happen to be to Edmonton and Lloydminster. But I do know that this season is going to change. And when mine does, I'll go back to playing soccer and I'll be able to have some time to mentor some of the other women in our organization. I do know that this season will change. And when mine does, you know, I'm very excited for the other opportunities that will come up. At different times in my life, I found I focus on different things in my life. There's a season for everything, and with time, the seasons will change. So for me, this is a little bit about my journey. And I don't think there is a magical formula for success, but I found, you know, if you buck the bias, you be great at what you do, find your passion, find your supporters, and just realize that there's a season for everything. Hopefully you can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karla. That's such a great timeline that you took us through. I loved it. When you sent me the slide, I'm like, of course you did it this way. I love it. I work in an engineering firm. This makes sense. I appreciate that. Next up, I'd like to introduce Alysia Rissling. She's an Olympic bobsledder. She's being presented by our another gold sponsor, Colliers International. Colliers International is a Canadian-owned commercial real estate company with a global reach. Colliers has over 15,000 people in more than 400 offices in 68 countries around the world. So whether you're a developer, an investor, a landlord, or a tenant, Colliers is a partner who invests in seeing their clients accelerate to their success. I'll introduce Alysia now, and Alysia is also a sponsored athlete of Scovan, so we have had Alysia, I guess, in our family for the last couple of years, and so it's a pleasure to have you here today, Alysia. Alysia began bobsleigh in the fall of 2012 after graduating from the University of Alberta, where she played 5 years of Pandas basketball with a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. After one season as a brakeman, she took to the driving seat and progressed from the provincial program to the national team. Alysia's bobsleigh career highlights include multiple gold medals on the North American Cup Tour, as well as overall points champion in the 2014-2015 season. She has won bronze medal in the World Cup race and has finished 6th place twice at the World Championships, including the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea. She was part of the history-making moment that caught international headlines in 2015 when she became the first woman to ever pilot a 4-man sled in the international race with a crew of all women. And I happen to know she's a very hard worker as well, dedicated to her sport. Alysia is an Edmonton native who calls Calgary her home and spends her time off the track and mentoring children about the importance of never backing down from challenges. She's an avid sports fan and activist for women in sport. Please welcome Alysia.
I'm a little bit taller than everybody else. Hopefully that will stay. All right, usually I speak to children, so this is a very different audience for me. I get to use my big girl voice. I heard a really interesting stat last week, actually attending a Women's Day event, and that is that over 90% of women in leadership positions actually have come from a sport background. I thought that was really fascinating. So it really tied in when you brought in your soccer story. Like I said, my name is Alysia Rissling, but my name is spelled A-L-Y-S-I-A, which really spells Alysia. So there's no commentator I've ever met or person in the media that ever seems to get it right. So I've kind of built this social media platform for myself in the form of Riz Bobsleigh. And my nicknames are Rizzo and Riz. So if you meet me later, feel free to call me by any of those. Have you ever noticed in professional workplaces, though, it's typically the men that will use nicknames more than women? I always like kind of wondered why that was. Being in sports, I've always used people's nicknames. But as I've gotten a little bit older, I seem to think that it's because women get in our heads a little bit and we worry a little bit more about the judgment of our peers. And that is, you know, we have this thought process that if we use somebody's nickname, maybe they won't take me seriously, being they'll think that our relationship is too casual. Or in contrast, men don't really seem to even think about that, yet alone care. One of the things that I've come really aware of in the last decade is that women are constantly held to a different standard than men, especially in male-dominated fields. I'm a bobsled pilot. Bobsled is a traditionally male-dominated sport. It's been around since the 60s, but women weren't even allowed to compete in it until the late 90s, and they didn't compete in it in the Olympic Games until 2002. Men compete in the 2-man and the 4-man event. So just, does everyone know what bobsled is? I'm gonna guess not. Bobsled, there's 3 sports that go down the tracks, and we have one in here in Calgary, and bobsled is the one that is actually like a sled that has multiple people in it. The pilot pushes from the side, jumps in, gets down, and then proceeds to drive the sled down the track. The brakeman pushes from the back. They start pushing at the same time. After the pilot gets in, then the brakeman can get in, and their job is just to hold on. They don't pull the brakes until you cross the finish line, and when you cross the finish line, then it's mass panic to get that sled stopped as fast as possible. The guys compete in the 4-man event as well. So that has a pilot, 2 side pushers, and a brakeman. Pilot and brakeman both have the same role, but the 2 side pushers, they just push, get in, and hold on. That's all they do. In the 2018 games, the women competed in the 2-man, the men competed in the 4-man, 2-man and 4-man, I should say. And since that moment, in the last probably since I've gotten into the sport in 2013, the women have been fighting for the right to be able to compete in both events, because it's not fair that the men have 2 chances to win a medal and the women only have 1. We went to the International Bobsled Committee, and we've been trying to push this thing for a little while. And the reason why it hasn't advanced as fast as we can is because bobsled is still ruled by a bunch of old European men that don't think that 4 women should be able to be in a sled. They don't think we're strong enough to do it. But in 2015, for the first time, they let women compete in the 4-man event. They said, fine, girls, if you want to do 4-man, you can do it, but we're not giving you your own event. You can do it with the boys. And Team Canada, we had a girl who is been a pilot for multiple years, and she got to do it, and she got to go on the World Cup circuit. She competed with a crew of all men. And the US did the same thing. They had a female pilot competing with a crew of all men. I was just a development level driver at this time, and I was competing on the North America's Cup Tour. And to win a bobsled race, you need 3 things. You need the fastest push possible, the smoothest drive possible, and you need the best equipment. Now, just a quick intro on the equipment. There are a bunch of old sleds out there, and they would be comparable to Fords. And when the athletes that you see at the Olympic Games, they're driving Ferraris. So even if you have the most talented, best driver pilot, and with the fastest push in the league, if they're driving an old sled, they don't stand a chance. I was competing and I was driving these old sleds, and I finally had won my first race on the North America's Tour. And then the next day I actually won the next one. And it was because my teammate and I had such a stellar push. So my coach that I had at the time was kind of chalking it up to, you just won because you guys outpushed everybody. Then we went on to the next track, and I was doing really well on this track as well. And this was the last race of the season, and there's always a 2-man race followed by a 4-man race. And the 4-man race that was going on that week didn't have enough sleds in it to be considered a full race. And the athletes that were competing for it, you get points based on how many sleds are in the race and where you finish. So we needed to fill the spots. I was driving really well at the time. We had an extra 4-man sled there. And I got told 2 days before this happened that I was going to be driving a 4-man sled. I said no, because here I am in this race. I'm just finally figuring out how to drive my 2-man, get the hold of it. And people have been telling me how terrifying it is to drive the 4-man sled. To put it in perspective, the 4-man sled is a semi-truck and the 2-man sled handles like a sports car. When you drive the 4-man sled, you need all these extra people pushing and the weight is harder to control. So I've been told it's very hard to get out of perspective, or sorry, very hard to get out of trouble. And I had this terrible perspective in my head about whether or not I'd have the skill level to be able to do it. And also because no other girls were doing this. This wasn't a thing. When I grew up, I was watching all these athletes, but everybody's career seemed to end, you know, after the university level. So the fact that I was still competing in sport I was, I think, 26 at the time, I was already ahead of the game and already doing what I thought was previously unfathomable. And now you're going to tell me that I've got to make history? What if it goes wrong? What if I crash? Then this is going to set it back for all the other girls that are following me, because if I go and screw this up, the next thing I know is they're going to be like, see, we told you girls can't do it. And they're going to continue to take away these opportunities. I got told that I was doing this whether or not I wanted to. And I felt really bad on top of this because we didn't have enough athletes with us for me to field the full crew. So the other female pilot that was with me, my teammate who I compete against, because the pilots are never in each other's sled, we had to join our 2 teams together to be one 4-man sled. So we were taking away from her 2-man training to be in my sled. Extra pressure. I remember walking around that start house and going up to every single boy and being like, okay, so what do I do in this corner that would be different than a 2-man? Or what do I do if we get into trouble and I might launch out of this corner? Like, how do you save it? Do you start earlier? All these other things, all these bad possibilities were going through my brain. And I went to my female coach, the one who was making me do this. And I looked at her and I'm like, what if I screw this up? And she had some pretty good advice for me, because her and I had a pretty turmoil relationship, I'd say. And she was an Olympic silver medalist from the 2010 games. And she was one of the women that originally was fighting so hard for the opportunity to do this. And unfortunately, she retired before she ever got the opportunity. And she goes, I believe in you. And that's all I really needed to hear. I needed to hear someone who put this kind of emphasis that I was in a position that no other woman had got to do before, but so many other women had fought for the right to be able to do it. And now I was had to do this on their behalf. I had to do it so that we could come together and prove that women actually can do this. So I had 1 day of training before we had to do the race, and I'll never remember, I was like, can I sit in the sled? Can you guys just push me off? And they're like, no, you have to learn how to push it too. So I push the sled, I get in, and I drive down. And I remember all I did was smash one wall. And I got to the bottom and I screamed. I was like, are you boys kidding me? It was actually so much easier to drive that sled than it was to drive my 2-man. Now, the reason why is because when women drive a 2-man sled, they're all the same, but we have less weight. More weight, more control. So actually navigating that bigger 4-man semi-truck down the track, I had more control, and the sled actually did what I wanted it to. So when I got to the bottom, I was like, what is everybody talking about? Why are they saying that this is so much harder? Yes, it goes faster, but I have more control. And I was so mad at every single guy, because once again, this was a situation that I was in that I wouldn't have known any better unless I tried it. I was being held to a different standard. Because if I was a woman, I wouldn't be able to handle the weight of the sled that the men can. And this really ticked me off. We did the race, and the girls, we all got in the sled, we loaded it. We didn't push it fast, but we finished the race. We came last. No big deal, because at the end of the day, in a weight controlled sport, we had 120 less kilos in the sled than the men did. And there's no way that we're going to be able to compete against the men. And we wanted to keep working towards getting this sport into the Olympic Games so we can have 2 shots at a medal. Unfortunately, Our European counterparts didn't have the same opportunity, and we weren't able to get enough girls doing the 4-man event that we couldn't get into the Olympic Games for 2018. We wanted to keep trying to do this, but the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, finally had put some pressure on the IBSF saying the girls need a second event now. And since the IBSF, the Bobsled Federation, was like, well, there's not enough girls doing 4-man, so they gave us a second event, and that's called monobob. It's a single person bobsled. It was kind of like a sick consolation prize because the sport's not even the same thing. In fact, monobob was created for Paralympians and for youth development drivers. So I consider it a little bit of a slap in the face. However, we do have 2 shots at a medal in 2018. I will only still be getting 1 though, because I'm not doing that event. But back to this different standard that we've all been held to. If we don't really know what we're capable of until we try it. And I think for a lot of women who are trailblazers right now, and we're seeing more and more women in leadership positions, it's pretty incredible to be a part of this generation where we have days like International Women's Day where we can celebrate how far we have come to get to this point, and the fight's not over. Here we are in 2020, and I couldn't be prouder and happier to be part of all these movements. And as Val was explaining before, I was watching that Flames versus Golden Knights game last night with the all-female broadcast team, and I was watching it with my male roommate. And I asked him what he thought of the game called, and he had no complaints about the quality of the commentary, there was no complaints about a lack of knowledge or speaking points. All he said to me was, it just sounds weird. I threw a pillow at him, obviously, but I kind of knew what he meant. And it was weird because we had just never heard this before. It was just weird because we had never heard it before. It was different, something different. And I think that for all these girls growing up right now, the more that we keep doing these weird things, the more we'll be able to inspire to them. I'm a bobsled pilot, I'm a 2018 Olympian, I'm a mentor for children, and I'm an advocate for female equality in sport. In 2015, I got to make history, and take all you want out of that statement, because all are things I'm extremely proud of. But the thing that still irks me is that in 2015, I had to do something that no girl had done before, and that is still happening every single day. And I hope that all you women out there continue to be trailblazers, and I hope that the only standards that you hold yourself to are your own high ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alysia. That was awesome. So next I'd like to, sorry, got ahead of myself. Introduce. Our next speaker is Terri Steeves, VP of Gas Canada for TC Energy. And I'd like to invite Jolene Burnett to come and introduce her as our gold sponsor for MasTec Canada.
Oh, I'm not nearly as tall as you. I'm glad you adjusted it. First off, on behalf of MasTec Canada and the wonderful team members that I have here with me today, I'd like to thank Scovan for all your hard work in pulling this together. We're really proud to be part of this event and proud to be celebrating and recognizing some of the powerful women that we have right here in our own backyard. So it's my pleasure today to introduce one of those fabulous ladies. As Vice President, Canada Gas Operations, Terri Steeves is responsible for the safe, reliable operation and maintenance of TC Energy's natural gas pipeline assets in Canada. That's a mouthful. After 29 years, it's safe to say she's a lifer at TC. She's held a variety of progressively senior roles within the natural gas pipelines and energy business units. But before that, she also held positions in field operations, design engineering, system design, and customer service. And she wants everyone to know that while she was doing that, she never imagined that she'd be in the role that she's in today. She attributes her success to showing up as her best self and allowing others to see her potential. In addition to her work life, Terri has been very active with the Calgary Area United Way, holding several positions, including campaign chair for TC Energy's corporate campaign. She's a volunteer with the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Alberta, providing guidance as a member of council, a mentor, and a science presenter in the local schools. She was also a founder board member for Ag for Life from 2012 to 15, holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering and a General Management certificate from the University of Calgary. Terri.
Hello, everyone. I think that was my whole talk. I don't actually have anything left to say, but thank you all for coming. So really, thank you all for coming. It's fantastic to see all the bright, shiny faces and great to see such a phenomenal turnout to celebrate International Women's Day. I too am extremely thankful. Wow, this thing's... There we go, that's much better. I'm already loud to begin with, and so that's way better. Can everyone hear me if I move that? Excellent. Okay, so fantastic to be here. Great to see so many smiley faces out there and see so much support for International Women's Day. I think it's a great thing for us to celebrate where we've come from, as we've talked about, but I think you'll hear some themes. Mine aren't going to be a whole lot different than what you've already heard, to challenge us to think about where can we go from here. What else do we need to do differently to ensure that we have an inclusive, a diverse, and a workforce and a society that embraces everybody, everybody's thoughts, everybody's different perspective to help us build that future that we can all be proud of. Very much like Karla, I'm super proud to be part of the energy industry. I think what we do every day, the ability to provide reliable, affordable and necessary energy, the energy that everybody needs every day to withhold the standard of living that they have, and our ability to improve that standard of living globally is something that each and every one of us in the industry can be super proud of. So that's my little, I'm not wearing my I Love Canadian Oil and Gas t-shirt today, but that's my little speech on that. So when I was invited to talk to you guys a little bit about think equal, build smart, and innovate for change, and reflect on my journey, where have I come from, and how did I end up here? As I told you all when we started, never when I sat in the chairs that you guys sit in, did I ever think that I would ever be an oil and gas executive. The thought never even crossed my mind. And so what I encourage you to do is not so much focus on that, but focus on where is your passion? Where do you want to put your energy to make a difference? And as Joelle said, allow others to see that potential in you, and then you can see it in yourself. So for myself, over my career, I've been blessed with a multitude of opportunities to contribute, to grow, to stumble, only occasionally fall, to pick myself back up, learn, and to move forward. I think that's what we all challenge ourselves to do. I had a great leader that I worked with once that said, he was in the marketing business in our energy group. And he said, I secretly hope every time I bring a new trader in, that in the first year, they lose money. And you're like, well, you're in charge of marketing and trading, don't you? Isn't it good if everyone makes money? He said, yeah, but the problem with people that come in brand new, eager to learn and to do well, when they make a whole bunch of money in the first year, they attribute the success to themselves. They think it's what I did and the decisions that I made. Certainly not luck, certainly not the market. And they maybe lose that opportunity to reflect. And so we learn the most when we stumble and fall. And so Carl's view was that if a marketer or a trader lost money in their first year, they became thoughtful, they became reflective, they wondered what they could do differently next time to make better decisions and to move forward. And so I've come away in my career thinking when I learned the most, it's when I stumbled and fell. When I took that opportunity to say, what could I do differently to get a better outcome? And I tried to improve myself to improve those outcomes. So I remember that stumbling and falling is always a big part of learning, and we should embrace that opportunity to stretch ourselves where we might fall, knowing that we can pick ourselves back up, learn, and be better. For me, I've always tried to embrace the experience. I believe the words that we often use now are to lean in, right? So take those opportunities, even if you're uncertain as to whether or not you can be successful. So for me, in a nutshell, Joelle already talked about it. But a piece that wasn't in there that's a little bit unique for me, I would suggest, is that the first 20 years of my career, I was an individual contributor. As mentioned, I worked in field operations, actually lived in Brooks, Alberta. And the balance of my career has been in Calgary, though I've traveled extensively. Design engineering, hydraulic design, commercial projects, operations. I even spent 4 months, Joel mentioned United Way, and so I had the wonderful pleasure of being a loan representative, actually working with United Way for 4 months, which was a phenomenal experience. After that 20 years of learning and growing as an individual contributor, I learned our business because I worked in multiple different areas. I learned about our industry. I learned about leadership. I learned about what good leadership looked like. So Karla talked a lot about that, good leadership and those role models. I also learned what kind of leader I didn't want to be by watching those examples that I didn't think were my favorite. I didn't think were getting the best out of the people that work for them. But I learned a ton. And I was able to hone in on some of those leadership skills that are super important, even if you're not a formal people leader. I learned the ability to influence. I learned the ability to collaborate and bring people together to get decisions made and to get things done. I learned to be a mentor. I learned to be a great listener. And I think it's those things, those skills that I learned early in my career as an individual contributor, that meant that I was able to move very quickly through the second part of my career. Only 5.5 years from my first management job, my first formal people leadership job, to being a vice president of TC Energy. As I mentioned, a position that I didn't ever think that I would be in. So in those 30 years, I've had my share of challenges, and that's really what I wanted to focus on for the last part of my talk. All those challenges shaped who I am today. It's not those successes, but it is those challenges that have defined me. And what I have learned is, it's how you show up in difficult times. It's how you show up in that adversity that defines and demonstrates who you are as an individual, right? I talk about my leadership brand, or I learned to talk about my leadership brand more recently. And so one of the things that stands out for me is being a courageous leader. And when I talk about being a courageous leader, it talks about leading with integrity, and it talks about leading and doing the right thing, even when it's not easy. And I would say even more so, especially when it's not easy, to live with your values and lead with your values and have integrity. So for me, some things that I've learned: how to be genuine. My very first role as an engineer in training, no less, I was in, as you can imagine, a team that was made up primarily of men, and my leader was a very traditional engineering leader. And so I would get feedback from him that my style and approach was very different than my male colleagues. One of the things that's really important for me also is to connect. To make sure that I know who I'm working with, what's important to them, and a little bit about them. And so the feedback that I got from that second leader that I had was I spent too much time on the phone, and that I should be able to get my job done much more quickly, and I'd be way more efficient if I would just get on the phone and ask what I wanted and then get off the phone. Can you imagine what I said? I was a very young engineer. I said, thanks for the feedback. So one of the things I'll tell you is that I think feedback is a gift. And like any gift, you can use it, repurpose it, or take it back. The important thing to remember, though, when you think about giving a gift in that manner, is you have to believe that the person that gave it with sincerity, that they wanted to give you that gift. So even if you choose to return it, because the gift is not your right size, right, or doesn't fit you quite right, or isn't something that you would use, you need to remember to acknowledge that it is in fact a gift that somebody took the time to give you. But don't forget, it is a gift. Use it, repurpose it, or give it back. The next thing that I learned was defining what motivates you, and probably equally as importantly, what doesn't. So fairly early in my career, I had what I would promptly define as unequivocally the worst job that I ever had. I thought that job was awful. And much to your surprise, I'm sure, I sucked at it. I could not figure that job out. The gentleman in the office next to me, he rocked that job. We had very similar roles. People lined up at his door to get his time and attention, to get his feedback on things, to get his advice. Nobody came to my door. And so I had to sit back and say, okay, what's going on here? I'm reasonably smart. I can get things done, I think. Why am I not showing up as my best self? And what I was able to reflect on is that the type of role that I had was not the right role for me. What I learned was it didn't motivate me. And so what I went about figuring out is what does motivate me? What are the types of things that I like? What do I want to see? What's going to get me to jump out of bed in the morning and be the best me that I can be? And so what I learned is this particular role that I had was a very operational role. The gentleman in the office next to me, he did awesome in that role because he celebrated every little win. Every time he met a customer request and was able to answer the question and get feedback that he hit the mark, that was a win for him. For me, I felt like I was answering the same question every day for a different customer and I was never getting ahead. For me, that job felt like Groundhog Day, right? So I was able to define that doesn't motivate me. I learned that what motivated me was challenging, interesting work that was audacious, that had a clear definition of success and was something that I could work towards that was meaningful for me. And so it's super important to know what motivates you. It was one of my first leadership lessons. There's a right job for everyone, and just because somebody's not performing isn't because they're not a good performer, they might not be in the right role. So understand what motivates people, understand what gets them to jump out of bed in the morning and be excited, and you're going to be able to motivate that person to be the best person that they can be in the role, and be willing to move people if that role is not the right one for them. Another opportunity for me was to build confidence and believe in myself. It seems kind of silly to stand up here as an executive of an oil and gas company and say I needed to build confidence and believe in myself. But I suspect we've all been through that at some point in time in our careers. So for me, it came through feedback from peers and leaders that I had at the time. I did my first 360 self-assessment, and my assessment of myself was a full point lower than all of my peers and all of my leaders. My leader dragged me into his office and said, "What is this? This is you thinking you can't do this. And this is everybody else telling you, you got this," right? And allowed me through others to see that I could do this, that I needed to believe in myself. Another feedback story that was really important to me is some feedback I got from some peers at the time about how I was showing up. And about my confidence and the fact that my lack of confidence in myself meant that people were unsure of how to take me and if they should take me seriously. So when I was earlier in my career, I had a nervous laugh. And so when I got in a situation where there was lots of people and it was fairly intense, I would make my points and I would say what I needed to say, and then I would kind of laugh, I would kind of giggle, right? And so I got feedback from two different people, neither one of them my leader, to say, "Terri, you're not being heard. Your great ideas, your voice are not at this table because people aren't sure if they should take you seriously." And so like any good individual contributor, I said, that's not right. I can be whoever I want to be. That's part of who I am. You can't change me. Because what are we all doing when somebody gives us feedback that might be a little bit constructive? We're immediately defensive. We're immediately thinking that hurt, right? I'm trying my best here. How dare you? But I took it away. I slept on it. And I reflected again and said, well, just a second here. I'd love to be taken seriously. I do think I have really good ideas. I do think I have something to contribute. And so I got my head around the fact that I wasn't changing who I am. but I can adjust my style to ensure that I am effective and that my ideas get heard. And so, yes, we need to hold on to our genuineness. That was my first point. Be genuine and be yourself, be true to yourself. But at the same time, make sure that you can be effective. Make sure that you're getting your points across and that you're being heard. And if that requires you to pivot or adjust a little, then you should do that so that you can be heard. Work to our strengths. So that one we've heard a little bit today too, right? So work to our strengths. Yes, we have gaps. Yes, we have things we can work on, but let's work to our strengths. For me, one of my key strengths is my values. I talked to you about my brand, right? Influence, collaboration, and integrity. Those are my values and my strengths, and I play to them. I work them all the time, right? I believe in people. I believe in the power of people and what they bring to the table. And that's one of the things that I think is a real important strength is, yes, look at your gaps. Is there things you need to learn, places you need to shore things up? Work on those things, but really lean in with your strengths. If you have a diverse, inclusive team, everybody brings different strengths. We don't need everyone to know how to do everything, so lean in with your strengths and play to those strengths. The next lesson I'll touch on really quickly, we did talk about a little bit with Karla, which is how does family fit in? How does family fit into this plan? And so I'll say something really quickly. Be present, not perfect. So Karla mentioned it as well. When you're there, when you're in the moment, when you're at work and you're working, be the best worker that you can be, right? Yeah, there's things you're gonna have to do when you get home. There's dinner to be made. There's kids to rush off to soccer, but when you're at work, focus on work and get that done. Conversely, the same is true. When you're at home with your family, when you're trying to be that best parent, be present in that and do your best at that. And don't expect to be perfect. You'll have guilt. You're gonna have guilt when you're at work about your family and how you're ignoring them. And then when you go home, you're gonna have guilt about work because you're spending all this time with your family, right? Forgive yourself, right? None of us is perfect. We're trying our best. Absolutely. There's no such thing as balance. That's some sort of crazy fallacy. The best you can do is be present where you are, commit to it when you're there. What I've learned over time is you can move on and move through that as quickly as you can. If you're present and you're fully focused on it, it'll take you way longer if you're distracted and trying to do too many things. So be present, but cut yourself some slack when you wane off and think about those other things you should do. Last one is seeing yourself differently. And this one is specifically around leadership. So as we aspire into leadership or move into leadership, we need to think about seeing ourselves differently. Now, all of a sudden, you're getting work done through others. And for all the individual contributors out there, you have no idea how hard that is. You're going to have been rewarded your entire career for what you could accomplish. And now, all of a sudden, your reward is based on what you can get other people to do. What's with that? That's not fair. But it is true. So learn to do that. Learn to get work done through others and see yourself differently. Realize that the only person you can change is yourself. This is the most valuable lesson in feedback, is if you're giving feedback because you want to change somebody else, you should give feedback in the mirror, right? The only person you can change is yourself. So think about how you would set it up differently, how you would motivate differently, how you would set the expectations and the goals so that somebody else can understand them. The last thing is to think about, what does my leader need from me to make a decision or to support the decision that I've made? So it's about looking up and thinking about, what do the people above me need in order to support or make this decision? Am I putting the right filter on that? So really what I can tell you is I've learned a lot, but what I can also tell you is that it's a journey. Reflect, learn, grow, and above all, challenge the status quo. Thanks very much.
There we go. Is there an engineer in the house? Get my mic working. Well, thank you everyone for those great presentations, well, to our speakers. So the next part of our session is we're going to have the panel discussion, and we've actually, if you could pull out your phones, we have an app that you can use called slido.com. So slido.com. Thanks, Tim. And you can participate by putting in your questions. If you just go to the hashtag IWD2020, and you can enter your questions there, and then we'll be taking questions from that and answering them. But we also have a microphone, so if you want to stand up and you're willing to ask a question live, we will also take live questions. Is everyone's mic on? Yeah.
I think so. Yep.
No.
Working now? Yep.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off. Sorry, I'm going to kick us off because I've got a couple questions for you. I really liked how, I've heard a lot of people talk about this. This was quite a big theme that we were talking about in some of the speeches that we heard, and I've just men and women in general have talking about how do they get out of their own way? How do we overcome that fear? And Claudia is going to talk a little bit about this in her book of just overcoming that fear to move on and really create your best life. Many times that fear keeps us from taking that next step of having a voice. That sense of, do I really deserve to be here? Am I good enough? Karla, thank you for mentioning that at the beginning, because I got the sense when I spoke to you on the phone, you asked me a few questions and you said, well, let me get back to you. Like, oh, I know what she's doing. But, and it really what studies show is that women, before they can make any decision or speak up or take kind of a role, anything like this, they feel like they have to be 100% confident, know 100% of the answers, just be fully knowledgeable to take on something like this, while perhaps their male counterparts, like you mentioned, would just take that on. And I think that's part of what women go through and reflect and feel that, well, am I going to have enough to say? Am I good enough for this role, etc. So I guess the question is, how do you recommend, or what have you done in the past to sort of get over that fear in your past? Do you have any past experiences where something kind of held you back? Your fear held you back, and you overcame it.
So for me, I think the biggest thing in helping me overcome fear and self-doubt is just recognizing that I deserve to be there, that I deserve to be sitting at the table. I think acknowledging this was a big part of me being able to get rid of some of that self-doubt. Now, one of the areas where I have had a challenge to overcome is really when I'm sitting at a table and with a group of people and say something, there's crickets, then it gets repeated. Sometimes it's by a male, sometimes by a female, and then everyone says, great idea. So for me, I've had to learn how to be more assertive in my role. I've had to learn how to speak up, know that I deserve to be there. And then I've also had to learn how to stop people from interrupting me, or maybe interrupt as appropriate. And I think those are some of the ways that I've overcome some of the self-confidence, or even some of the challenges that I've had.
Okay, I'll take a quick kick at that one as well. And tell you, one of the key things that I've been able to do over my career is have a really phenomenal group of peer mentors. And so what I would say intentionally and unintentionally done, because it's been a little bit of both over my career, is found a group of mentors that are very different than me. So most of them female, but one of them male. But people, I have one girlfriend, absolutely phenomenal, CEO of Sustainability Canada. She is an entrepreneur at heart. She is an innovator, and I couldn't be further from either one of those things, working 30 years for a regulated utility. And so I love her perspective. I love what she brings to the table. I love bouncing ideas off her because she thinks about it so differently than I do. I have another female mentor actually, that Karla knows. And I love her because I know no one more ambitious than she is. She said about her entire career, she's a lawyer, said about her entire career to be GC, to be general counsel somewhere. I thought, wow, right? I didn't ever want to be anywhere near the C-suite myself, but good on you. And I loved her perspective because hers was always not why, but why not? Go for it. One of my key male mentors was a shameless self-promoter. I loved him for that because he believed that he was capable of anything, even if he only had 20% of the skills. So I will share with you really quickly a story related to him is we had a program around promoting, engaging and enabling females to become executives within TC Energy. You guys don't tell anybody, even though we're live streaming this, all of us in the program called it Chicks for VP. And I actually thought I didn't want to be part of the program. I thought I want to get ahead on my own merits. I want to get ahead because of what I'm capable of doing, and I don't want to be special. When I approached him and said, okay, what do you think? Come on, Jeff, tell me your real thoughts. He said, I tell you, every day and every night, there is not a single male counterpart you have that would not jump at that opportunity in less than 5 seconds if given the opportunity to get coaching, to get feedback, to get an assessment, to get executive level coaching and mentoring and sponsorship. You would be crazy not to take that. And by the way, he said, you deserve it. So.
I don't really have much to add. You ladies covered a lot of it, but my personal philosophy is, and that's the presentation that I do for my kids, is really focus on the concept of being relentless and persevering through any obstacles. So, and a lot of those fears that we have are usually just the ones that we put on ourselves. So my little philosophy is always challenge accepted, because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to, so why not you?
Right. Thank you. So I know that just for some of the women here, I think some people struggle with, how do you raise your own profile to get noticed by more senior executives in your organization? How do you get to that top, maybe even if there's not as many opportunities within an organization, how do you do that to showcase your skill set within to your senior executives to prove that you have what it takes to take on these leadership roles? What would you recommend for women trying to get to that level?
So mine I mentioned in my talk. I would tell you what's propelled me into the roles that I have now is showing up well in failure, showing up well in the difficult times, because it's easy to be awesome when things are going well, and it is really, really hard to be awesome when things have gone completely sideways. And it's to remember in those opportunities, very similar to the one you talked about, Alysia, which is no one expects you to win, but it's how you show up in making this the best outcome possible under the given circumstance that lets people know what you're really made of. And so don't be afraid to take a risk because you think failure means that things are going to go bad and you're not going to get that next opportunity. I would tell you quite the opposite is true. Take that risk, and if you show up well, even if things go sideways, right, you have integrity, you're able to collaborate, you're able to get the best outcome possible given a really unfortunate circumstance, that's going to show people what you're made of.
I don't really have much to say on this topic. Like I'm out. Yeah.
For me, what I've found for the individuals on my teams that have been highly successful in getting noticed is really they're passionate about what they do. They have to love it. And then if they're really passionate about the job they're doing, they tend to put in the extra effort. And then I think they are great at what they do. So I think it's a combination of those three things for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think hard work shows up no matter where you are, and in anything that you're doing, whether it's sport or your professional career, people notice that, and hard work definitely shows up in those cases. For sure, that's great. I also think, like I see just so many fantastic women really stepping out, and as Donovan mentioned too, how anytime there's an opportunity for volunteerism, even within our organization or other associations, I think you can still demonstrate leadership, whether it's in your organization, associations, your community, your children's hockey teams or soccer teams. You still have that opportunity, and I think to demonstrate within that your leadership skills. And you might not even realize it, but you're having an influence on others by taking on those roles. And you're also developing an internal skill set by that to be comfortable or taking on that leadership role in a more comfortable environment, maybe a safer place, to help you build your own practices as well. That's what I would recommend. Question 2, Terri, it's so great to see so many people from TC Energy here today. Now you mentioned you mentioned a little bit about one of the things TC is doing, but can you tell me what TC Energy is doing to promote a more diverse representation in the organization?
Fantastic, great question. So I think really what we're seeing, and one of the things I'm proudest of, not just with TC Energy, but the industry in general, is we're moving away from this conversation about visible differences. So when we talk about those categorized differences of minorities, gender, ethnicity, able-bodied and disabled-bodied people, we're moving away from that conversation and really moving forward with a conversation around inclusion. And so for me, what TC Energy is doing is shifting the conversation to say everybody brings a different skill set and a different set of values and background and experience and education to the table. And we are the best company, we are the best industry when we value all of those different inputs. And so the challenge for us as leaders in the industry is to actually learn about the people we work with, learn about our teams, to understand who are they, where do they come from, what do they have to offer, and make sure that we're making that part of our conversation and that everybody has a space that they feel like they can contribute. So the conversation around psychological safety, so that they feel like this is a safe place that they can contribute and not feel like they're going to be not respected or not listened to. So we want that psychological safety, and we want to know that everybody brings something different to the table, and it's not always about their visible differences. If we don't ask, we don't engage people, if we don't get to know them, then we don't know who they are and don't understand what they're bringing to the table. Like, we have people with all different education, background, experience, and I think we make the best decisions when we're bringing all that together and considering it thoughtfully as we move forward as an industry and as a company. And so that's the key shift at TC Energy, away from the numbers, away from the visible minorities, and more towards inclusion and understanding that everybody has something to bring to the table.
I'm just going to go through the questions here too. Thank you for entering them in. One of the questions was, how do we prevent people from thinking one only got somewhere because she's a woman? Because I think people hear this all the time from men on boards and women who are in C-suite, that they only really got that spot because they're women.
I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll let you guys go afterwards. One of the things that I think is any opportunity that presents itself, as females, you got to take it. You got to put your hand up, you got to throw your hat in the ring, and regardless if you think people are going to say the only reason you got there was because they needed a certain quota, it doesn't matter. I say you take that opportunity, you rock it, you be great at what you do, and you prove them wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. I'll share with you one of my peers. When I talked about this program earlier that we had that was trying to encourage women in leadership, and after we went through the program, there was a bit of a debrief with our human resources team, and she can't help herself, and so I love her for it. She said to the HR representative, said, "What could we do differently to encourage more women in senior leadership roles?" And she said, "Well, the answer is quite easy and quite unequivocal, right? Just lower the bar." And HR said, "What? She goes, yeah, like clearly if women only had to work twice as hard as their male counterparts instead of 3 times as hard to get recognized, you'd have way more women in senior leadership. So she was making that point, that women work really hard and sometimes it's harder to get recognized. And when you do get recognized, know that you probably worked 3 times as hard to get there. So don't feel bad and don't let anybody talk down to you like you didn't deserve it.
Just in how this relates to sport for me, actually I have a lot of my male teammates complain that the females are the only ones that ever get sponsorship dollars, and they blame it on the fact that we are women. But the thing that I come back to all the time, and I think Scovan does an amazing job of portraying this, is like, what have you done lately for other people? And I can look at a lot of my male teammates and they like to go to training and then go home and play video games, where a lot of the females are out there and we're the ones that are volunteering. We're doing these mentoring things, anything that we get asked to do that could get us the exposure. So again, come back into working twice as hard for it, and then just to get our names out there, to put our name in the hat, to have the opportunity to be able to go after those resources that we need. So kind of the same principles.
Great, thank you. I want to shift into mentors. I heard a couple of comments around mentorship and how important that was in your careers. We know that it's really important to be a mentor and to be mentored. How do you think we can play a better role in lifting other women up, bringing them to the table? If we're at the table, how do we help bring up others to that table and raise their profile or raise them up in the organization or in sport?
Yeah, just in general, I find women, it's our natural instinct to be competitive against each other. And because I think for so long, there's only been so many opportunities for women to move into these roles. So every other woman you're pitted against to be able to go after that same role. When in fact, the way we're going now is that it's just in general, all these roles are available and we have to be the best person for the job, and we don't do it by cutting each other down. I think the best way that, and even just going forward with International Women's Day, the idea of creating allies, women's allies, and it's not about feminism like we need to take over the world. It's like, no, we just need to be able to have the same opportunities to go after these specific positions, and we do that by supporting each other to get to those spots.
I think for me, one of the things is to recognize when there's unconscious biases in the room. And so I think one way you can help with getting women to have a different profile is sitting around your table and thinking about who's around that table and what biases do they bring with them, and acknowledging, you know, that component of it, because everybody is going to have a certain history. And, you know, if somebody's sitting there and, you know, a male's thinking the exact same way that they're thinking, you may have a tendency to like their ideas, whereas if you have some diversity, then you may be more creative and have different ideas. So I think it's just acknowledging that every person comes into a room with unconscious bias and trying to let people know when some of that is coming through.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me, one of the important things there is to declare your bias, right? So we talk about role modeling, leading by example. So one of the things I like to do is actually declare my bias, right? Whether it be positive or negative. So if I'm giving feedback on someone, if I'm talking about a particular idea, I'll actually lead with my bias, right? To say, hey, this I'm inclined to not like this because I tried this one back 7 years ago and it didn't work. So that's my bias, but I'm willing to hear what you have to say and how it might be different this time. But if you lead with that bias and you do that as an example, people realize that everyone has bias and that it's good to declare it.
Yeah, I have a question. So when I heard that question, I thought, oh my God, we could support women so much if we had the courage to be ourselves. So what's your experience of that?
For me, going into the 2018 games, I was in a foreign territory, my first Olympic Games, the biggest race coming up, going into a season with all this pressure. And I am the captain of my sled. And so it's my job to make the rules. It's my job to tell my teammates what time they show up to training. And I just was kind of in too deep. I didn't know how to handle it. And that was kind of the first time that I really had to accept that I needed to gain a mentor and put somebody in a position that can kind of help guide me through that stress. And I was lucky enough to recruit an athlete to come back who had some of that Olympic experience. And what she did was, even though she came back to be my brakeman, who is, you know, I'm supposed to be her leader, she actually took a lot of the day-to-day stresses under so that I could focus on the things that I needed to do in order for us to be as successful as possible. And we did it by having so much fun together. And we took the stress off of, we obviously were still working very hard, but not so much on what we were focusing on. Was our end goal wasn't to win. Our end goal was to do the best job we could, acknowledging all the other issues that were going to be stressing us out and bringing us down, and how we're going to overcome each of those. And then by focusing on the little steps, the end game was actually a lot easier to get to, and we did it really well together.
Yeah, I think I would just expand on that to say, surround yourself with people that compliment you, right? So you don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to do everything to be yourself. You need to, first of all, personally be in a comfortable space, but you also need to surround yourself with people that are good at things that you're not good at, right? And really embrace that, right? And I think that, yeah, for me, one of my key things is always to be genuine and be yourself. I am not like my my traditional engineering counterparts. I suspect Karla's not either, but that's a good thing, right? Because diversity is important and it makes us better, makes our decisions better. And so, yeah, just be happy that you are who you are, and what you bring to the table is something awesome.
Yeah, and my answer would be very similar, that I think it's very important to be yourself. If you try to be somebody else, you likely aren't going to be successful at that. But for the other thing is that I don't think anyone can succeed on their own. And so you find mentors that are going to help you along the way. Stay true to yourself, but they're going to help you kind of snowplow out some of the hurdles in the way that maybe you weren't seeing because you weren't focused on the right idea. So I've found that my male mentors and my female mentors have really helped me see opportunities in a different way than I would have on my own.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone who'd like to ask something? I can give you a mic. You're like, no, I already put it in Slido, Val, just read it. Okay. I'll just do a couple more questions. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through these. There's an interesting comment I saw here. So somebody wrote, a male coworker said to me that fewer women are in C-suite level positions because they don't want it. How do you respond to that?
For me, I guess I would say that I think that International Women's Day is really important, because even in this day and age, 50% of the population is underrepresented and they're underestimated.
I guess my only response would be, really? And how do you know that?
My response to that would just be like, and similar, I guess, in sport and just the climate that's going on with women's sports inequality right now, and the gender pay gap. Like, you think that all of us want to do this for less money, or we all just want that opportunity to be the best version of ourselves, and be fairly compensated for it. So I think when people are making those assumptions, that it's just because they haven't heard enough women speak up and express how bad they want it. And I think that's also going into this culture that we need to change and create, that we need to be able to ask for what we want.
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, there's another question that it's actually a perfect segue to that, is around that gender pay gap. And you know, the question here is, what advice would you give to a woman in negotiating her salary? And do you think it's realistic to believe the gender wage gap will eventually close? And I just do have a comment on that, because I think I find when I talk to women about this topic, I think inherently women don't feel like they deserve it, like they're afraid to ask for it, while there's a different mindset with male counterparts that believe that they're worth it and they deserve it. So it's just interesting, and I don't know if there's ever been studies on, is it because we're just not asking for it, or because it's the other way around, right? So anyway, what are your comments around that? Anyone?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a combination of both things. I think as we talked about, traditionally, you know, not to generalize, but traditionally male counterparts will go after a role more senior with less of the qualifications. And you're less likely to do that as female. So I actually honestly believe that part of the way to close the gap is to lean in, right? Take on more risk, take on some of those opportunities that you traditionally wouldn't, or that you don't think you might be fully capable of, and believe in yourself. So that's the part that you can do about it. Back to my point about the only thing you can change is yourself. And then, yeah, with respect to, you know, that being a real thing, right? The studies tell you that it is true, right? There is a gender pay gap. I don't see it at TC Energy, but that doesn't mean that it's not out there in industry and it's not out there. And so I think the biggest thing you can do is reflect on what you can do personally, and that's lean in and take those opportunities, stretch yourself and believe in yourself.
In my opinion, especially in the sport world, I don't think in my generation I'm going to see the pay gap come together, just because it is a business model. But however, I think a lot of the work that the women are doing in sport right now, particularly with women's soccer, if you follow that, or women's hockey, they're pushing back and they're making the strides to make the change. And I think that to start, it's not going to be equal, but if they're able to create these platforms that eventually can gain traction and gain fans and become this business model that can actually turn into something that maybe one day most sports will be able to do what tennis and golf has do, and that has closed that gap significantly. So there's hope for our kids.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I just want to summarize a couple things that we heard today that just I really found the key takeaways for me is sort of decide who you want to be, not what you want to be. It's not necessarily the role, but the kind of person that you become, and what defines you is more about the passion that you take on and how you're creating change. How do you want to make an impact? And I love that theme as well, to be a courageous leader, especially during tough times. Terri, I think that's so meaningful too, is to really be courageous, and not during just the easy times, but when you really have to make tough choices. How do you become that courageous leader and advocate for others? Define what motivates you and find your passion. I hope this is something that we're all going to take away from and really think about what our passion is. What's the passion that you want to have, and how do you want to make change? And be present, not perfect. I think I live in this guilt world every day as a mother of 3, is never feeling like I'm doing a good enough job in any one of my spheres of life, but I'm just trying to do my best. So I hope my kids appreciate that one day.
Otherwise, you just put more money in the therapy jar, Val.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So now I'd like to invite Claudia Velandia, and this ends our panel discussion, but Claudia Velandia is, we've got a special treat. She's actually someone who used to work in our industry and has turned her passion into, speaking of passion, her passion into a career as a consultant and author. And she's going to speak about her book, about Wake Up, How to Get Out of Your Mind, Stop Living on Autopilot, Start Choosing Your Best Life.
Working? Sounds good. Fantastic. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you guys for organizing this, and thank you ladies for sharing your wisdom. I learned so much from you, and I enjoy as well the Q&A. So, and thank you all of you for being here today as well. I'm very excited to be here and share what I know with you in this really 5-6 minutes that I have with you today. So now that you guys are here, I have a couple questions for you before I start. Who here believes is a high achiever? Hands up? No? How many? High achiever? Who here wants to live more about life and really nothing to stop them? Enjoy life? Okay. Who here believes that you are the only one who is in their own way to achieve your best life? All right. So now that you guys are in here and you know that we are the only ones who are limiting our own self, I have another question for you. Are you controlling your mind, or is your mind controlling you? Take a couple minutes to think, or seconds actually, to think in this question. All right. So most people think that they are in control of their mind. But in reality, something else different is true. If you are not aware of what's going on in your mind, what's happening in your brain. If when you are not aware of this, what is taking over your subconscious mind. So let me explain you this with an analogy. When you are driving to work or somewhere that you often go, when you're driving, what is your mind doing? Anyone? I can hear you. Thinking. It's thinking. It's thinking about anything else but the road ahead and the destination. And while you are in your head so busy thinking about what's going on at work, what's going to happen, what you're going to do next, in that present moment, you are as well making decisions in the road. You're making decisions about how to change in lanes, the speed that you are going, the exit that you take. And even sometimes you get to the place and say, how did I get here? How did that happen? Exactly. So similarly happens with our life. We go as an autopilot. We go doing things without even thinking about what's going on. So in that case, imagine that the car represents your life. The road represents the actions. The actions you take in the road represent the actions you take in your life. And the car represents your mind. And you, the driver, represents the mind. Do you guys get it? I got confused a little bit there. Okay, let's do it again. The car represents your life. You, the driver, represents the mind. And the actions that you take in the road represent the actions that you take in life. Now you got it? Okay, cool. So in this case, who is driving the car of your mind, of your life? Your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is doing this. But in this case, it does it from your beliefs, your values, your biases, your personal experiences, your emotions, and others. And all of that becomes your personal conditioning. So think about this personal conditioning as a program that runs in your subconscious mind as an autopilot. And as you go to your business, go through your life, and if you are thinking about anything else, you are making decisions in the present moment and you are not even aware it's happening. So that's why you continue recreating your life, seeking to have different results, but at the same time, you're making the same thing. That makes sense? So let me explain you this with another analogy. What do I have here? A rock. So where do you believe are the possibilities for the rock? Anyone? What can rock can do? Say that again? You can break a window. What else? That's an option. That's what the rock can do. What else? Come on, guys. A necklace. Say what? A necklace? Yeah, use it for decoration as well. Necklace. Like what else? Skip water. Skip water. Awesome. Okay, guys. More ideas now? A pet. A pet? Yes, you totally can have it, right? It's a pet. It's possible. Like in the squeamish, I remember those when I was growing up, like to have a pet. Also, you can have it like in your pocket. You can do so many things with your rock, right? You can decorate it. You can put it as a paper holder. That makes sense? So you use the rock based on what you believe the rock can do. And I'm sure if we continue here doing this exercise, we can have multiple options of what you can do with the rock. But you will be using the rock based on your level of consciousness. You will be using the rock based on what you believe the rock can do, right? So now imagine that the rock is you. So you will be believing about yourself based on what you believe you can do. So all of those that we have in our mind is limiting us, right? So that's one part that is very important to know that is limiting us, is our subconscious mind. The other part that is limiting us a lot and has been discussed here as well is fear. But fear, the important thing you need to know about fear is that's created in your mind. It's an unconscious reaction of your brain protecting you. It's evolutionary, something that happened to us evolutionary. So the brain is protecting us from anything that can cause us physical harm, or it's going to protect us from anything that would cause us psychological pain, anything that would cause us emotional pain. And the interesting part is like the brain doesn't have anything to discern, oh, this is psychological, or maybe this is physical. Everything runs for your nervous system, and your brain will be reacting all the time. So that's very important to know how the brain works and your physiology. The other interesting part is then when we talk about fear, that you know now that it's in your brain, I'm not talking about the fear that someone can have when you are changing a new career, going to a new country, or maybe having a new business. All those are big fears that we are very aware that they exist. Like, okay, I'm going to move to a new country, I feel fear, you know it. But I'm talking about the small fears that we experience in our daily life. And I'm talking about the fears, for example, not giving your opinion in a meeting because of fear of being judged, or not taking a new project because of the fear of failure, or not making a networking event or making a phone call because of the fear of rejection. All those fears that are unconsciously are managing our life until we don't bring awareness to them. So then now that you know that, okay, my subconscious mind is on my way and my brain as well is on my way, how can I get out from it? Right? So one of the things that actually Terri spoke about it, and it was about presence. Be present. About being in the moment, understand what's going on with yourself, bringing self-awareness to your emotions, to your thoughts. And get curious. When you guys are in a meeting and you feel like some nervousness racing and you feel a little bit of fear, objectify the situation and say, how interesting, I'm feeling fear right now. I'm wondering where it's coming from, right? So just put it like outside of yourself. Also, other thing that you can do is like get curious. When you have that belief of like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough, or like, oh, maybe I don't have all that it takes, get curious about that. Where is that coming from? How true is that? I don't believe you. And start showing it different ways, because, you know, I don't believe you because I have done this, and this. So you're a liar. So that's the best way to start getting out of ourselves and our mind. And in my book, I talk more about it. And if you guys have any questions, I will be in the back. Feel free to ask me anything. And yeah, I'm here to support you because this is my passion. I work in the oil and gas industry for many years, and I'm very happy to be in front of you and share what I know, because I have overcome fears and my own beliefs many, many times over to be standing up in front of you. Right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Claudia. That's great. Danica, do you want to come up here? So this wraps up our formal part of the event. We do have some exciting draw prizes in store for you. Claudia has kindly offered to donate 2 of her books today, so we will do a draw. Just really making sure I can't see. And you must be present to win the prize. Kelly, Keisha, here? Keisha Kelly. Oh, wait, sorry. That's tricky. Okay, Nahid Safai. Camille Moyne. Camille? In the back? Okay. The next prizes, did you get? Daryl, did you have something for us? Daryl, PTW, is he here still? No? Rodka, okay, I think we had a couple of gift cards. Thank you. Okay, excellent. We have 2 gift cards for Kaylee's. Irish Pub. This is compliments of PTW Energy Services. Katie Best. All right. This is always my favorite part. It's like, pick me. I never get picked. Javarai Kamran. Sure, I pronounced that incorrectly. Okay. Danny Keller. There you go. Congratulations. All right, now we have 3 sets of pairs of tickets to Calgary Flames versus San Jose Sharks on Monday, March 23rd. The trick is you have to be in our box with us. Alysia Lindsay. Sarah Velandia. Okay. Susan Blight. Okay. Take it easy, girl. There you go. Excellent. Well, I'd like to just thank our sponsors one more time. To our gold sponsors, MasTec Canada, PTW Energy Service, and Colliers International, as well as silver sponsors, Spartan Controls, Enerflex, Drifter, AFTI WatchDog, Mergen Law LLP, and then our bronze sponsors, Osum Oil Sands, Deltastream Energy, AES Advanced Electrical Services, Maxfield, HIVE Innovations, Gemini Fabrication, and Starbelly Kitchen and Bar for providing the catering today. So we invite you to stay for food and drinks and networking. That definitely wraps up our event, and we'll also be hosting an interview room in the adjacent meeting room if you care to participate or partake. We'd be happy to take your interview. So please drink responsibly. Taxi chits are available at reception if you need one. And thank you. Have a wonderful and safe evening.